Bad technique will get you injured. I'm sure someone spewed this BS to you before, but trust me, it is utter BS. And I'm a physio, I should know. So the question is, does technique even matter? The short answer is yes, so let's get into it. So the king of the chest exercises, the bench press. So I'm sure you guys have all heard. Set yourself up, Dr. Mike, pull the lats back. So we want to drive through the legs, arch through the back, shoulders down, make your neck long and keep your head down, right? We've all heard that. The question is, what does that achieve? Let's talk about it. So we've said before, technique is not going to get you injured, right? So why do we need it? What makes it so important? Well, there's two things really. One, to choose which muscle's working, but more importantly, to choose which muscles aren't working. So one thing that applies to every lift you do, and that is tempo. And what does that mean? Going up and coming down. The main thing is control your eccentric. Research shows anywhere between 3 to 9 seconds. So do 3 seconds, a 9-second eccentric is just virtually a waste of time because they achieve exactly the same thing. Right guys, brace yourself. Shit's about to get technical, but don't worry, I'll have diagrams on screen just for you. So first of all, let's look at the bench press, right? Which muscles are working? So we've got your pectoralis major, pectoralis minor, and your anterior deltoid. Then we need to look at, right, which muscles are helping out by stabilizing the movement, and this is where it gets technical. You've got your serratus anterior, which are those gills that you often see on swimmers or boxers. Then you've got your rhomboids, rhomboid major, rhomboid minor. Then you've got your rotator cuff. So that is teres minor, infraspinatus, supraspinatus, and subscapularis. Then you also have teres major helping out because that also internally rotates and stabilizes the shoulder. And then we've got the traps, the muscle everyone wants out. Now they are vital, and no, traps are not just this top part, it's a massive muscle. You've got your upper fibers which help, you've got your mid fibers and your lower fibers, and all are vital to stop your shoulder blade flying off and your arm disappearing. I'm sure you guys have seen those people in the gym when they start pushing either with an overhead press or bench press and one arm starts shaking and it looks like it's weaker. 9 times out of 10, it's not a weakness whatsoever, it's an instability issue. That's where the shoulder blade comes into it. Think about building a house on solid foundation. If your shoulder blade is that foundation and it's solid, you'll have a lot more strength to push. If you try to build your house on a floating boat, it's going to be all over the place and probably sink, and that's exactly the same with the shoulder blade. So that is where technique comes into it. What muscles do we want working? We want our pecs. Now there's no way of distinguishing between pec major and pec minor. They're both going to work, but hey ho, pec majors are a lot bigger, a lot stronger, therefore will do more work. So the chesticles will grow regardless. The key here is what muscles don't we want doing too much? And the answer is the triceps and the shoulders. So let's get down into it. So the triceps are the easiest to keep out. All you need to do is have your wrists directly above your elbows. If you do that, the triceps will be out regardless of your grip width. So if you go narrow and you keep your wrist directly above the elbows, the triceps will be out. The problem comes in with the bench press is if you flex the elbow, so you collapse there, and you see that movement there, that becomes a tricep bench press, which is fantastic to grow your triceps, but exactly the opposite of what we want to do when it comes to the bench press. So next muscle we want to keep out, and this is where most people go wrong, is the deltoid. We want the deltoid out, and that is because we want to grow the chest or we want to move the most amount of weight possible, and both require the chest working, not the deltoid. Yes, the deltoid will help, but this is where your whole shoulder blade stuff comes in. So if we're in that position, so protracted or just neutral through the shoulder blades, and we come down and we press up, the shoulder, as you can see there, is higher up than my chest. The best cue I can give you is engage the lats, arch the back, right? Set yourself up nicely, drive hard through the legs. So we in shoulder blade retraction, so squeeze back together, shoulder blades down, back arched, neck nice and long. And now you'll see at the bottom of the rep, look how much higher the chest is compared to the shoulder. And the same thing at the top of the rep. What we don't want is nice, high chest at the bottom, and then we come up and we push to there, because then the tension's off the chest and on the shoulder, and you can see my arch is now gone. So if we set up properly, nice high arch, squeeze the shoulder blades, drive with the legs, and we're pushing there, my chest stays higher than my shoulder throughout the entire lift. Next up, we need to choose which part of the chest do we want working. Now on the flat bench, you want your mid fibers, so the sternal fibers. They are the biggest and strongest fibers of the chest press. Now the way in which we do this is through grip width, and I've got a whole video explaining this. If you want to check that out, I'll have it linked after this video. So grip width, the best place to go is twice the distance between the two knobbly bits. So you've got these knobbly bits on the top of the shoulders called your acromion. So double that distance, and that is going to be optimal for the sternal fibers. Now the key here is we want to flare out slightly. We don't want to go into a full-on guillotine press like that, although there'll be a lot of tension on the chest, but the amount of weight and depth will be limited. And we don't want to come in too narrow, then we get some tricep involvement at that grip width. So you want to be at a comfortable position. I would say aim sort of mid-sternum and then pushing back up. So next up is incline bench. Why do we do it? Because we want to wham up a chest. That's the only reason, right? And because it's an alpha lift. So first things first, the angle of the bench. We want anywhere between 30 and 45 degrees. Too low and we're not going to get the sternal fibers. Too high and you're getting too much shoulders, or that's what we so thought. It turns out grip width matters more than bench height. And again, referring to that same video, I'll link after this. So for the incline press, they want 1 times the distance, show the most clavicular fibers. So these are the fibers, the upper chest that attach to the collarbone. The problem with this lift is you cannot keep the shoulders out because the shoulders and the upper fibers of chest share function, shoulder flexion. So when you're on your flat bench, you don't want much shoulder flexion. So here we can see the shoulders flexing as we push. So we want to go nice and narrow. And this is where it gets really important to keep the triceps out. So you want to go nice and narrow, and to do that you'll have to aim lower down. So apply every single thing I said about the shoulder blade from the bench press. So arch back, neck nice and long, shoulders back, shoulders down, and shoulders squeezed together. But now we get a much bigger bar arc. So we get that nice J curve from the bench bar. So we're coming down and aim a lot lower to keep your wrists above your elbows, and then we're pushing up from there. So you get a lot more depth on this movement, and we get a much bigger J curve from the bar. So you get that J bar path. It's not straight up and down like this and turned into triceps. We don't want that, but you cannot isolate the upper chest from the shoulders. We just need to keep the shoulders back, as I said, to keep the delts out as much as possible. But in this one, unfortunately, you can't separate them. So next up, we've got flies. Now I'm going to choose machine flies and cable flies. Both the technique stays really similar, just one you have a seat. So I'll put B-roll over of me doing a machine fly. Obviously we don't have one at our work gym. So the key for this is utilize your pelvis. Now that sounds really counterintuitive, but if you have a posterior pelvic tilt and a rounded back, your shoulders are going to tilt forward and your head's going to peel away. So what we want to do is anteriorly tilt the pelvis. This will allow your mid-back thoracic spine to go into extension, which then makes the job of the shoulder blades a hell of a lot easier. So all those muscles from the bench press, it's exactly the same here, keeping the shoulders back and down and head back. The number one thing I see that everyone does on flies, be it bench flies, cable flies, or machine flies, is they do the lift perfectly until the last minute where they pull their head forward. Watch what's happening to my shoulder blades here. So if I keep my head back arched, pressed in, we can do the flying movement, keeping the shoulders back. Watch what happens if I pull my head forward. You see that tilt forward from the shoulder blades? That takes all that tension that you've built up straight off of the pecs, and that is the last thing we want to do when it comes to flies. So for all flies, and actually for bench and incline too, we want to squeeze a fist, and this will carry on to shoulders as well. Now, why do we want to do that? Well, squeezing a fist has been shown to incorporate the rotator cuff and stabilize the shoulder blade. So if you're grabbing onto the cable, grabbing onto the bar, grabbing onto the dumbbell, squeeze nice and tight. No, that's not going to mean your triceps work more. More importantly, it allows your shoulder blades to work more optimally, allowing you to push more weight. So for the standing fly, it varies slightly. We want to go up to the top of the machine. The reason is because when we get into it, right, we're on a forward lean. So if we look at the angle of the cables to the angle at which I'm moving, it's at 90 degrees. So what we don't want to do is have them angled up top and stand upright, because then we're going to be working a decline movement, and that is unneeded. Again, refer to the same video I talked about earlier. So we want to go back, get a nice stretch on the chest muscles, forward lean, squeeze tight, keep the shoulder blades back and head back. And there we'll get a lovely stretch on the chest at the back end. Now for this, you can actually play around a bit. With this cable, it's really nice because you've got all the tension in the stretch position. If you have a really wide cable, you're gonna have more tension mid-range. Now, I know Jeff Nippard likes to say it matters, and I would say if you've got the opportunity, do both. Strengthen throughout the range. My problem is with a cable on this movement, and this is why I like the machine more because it's got a more even strength curve, is that over here, it's really heavy, really difficult. And over there I can hold it all day. There's like no tension whatsoever. So what is the point of doing that? So for this movement, you might as well just do stretch partials because over here, you're just having a breather. So I'm gonna give you guys a bonus fly, and this is the upper clavicular raise. Now you see a lot of people in the gym doing it with double cables. I would advise you to do this with one arm at a time. The reason is you can go past the midpoints a lot easier. The key to this is have your stance width nice and comfortable. Do not go one foot in front of the other and lean back. That backwards lean is key to trying to keep the shoulder out as much as possible. So for this one, we want to raise up, and what a lot of people do is they just raise up in front of themselves. That is all well and good, but that is a glorified front delt raise, and we do not want that. What we want to do is try and shorten the distance between where the pec attaches to the arm and where it attaches to the collarbone. And the best way to do that and to try and isolate the chest is trying to aim the middle of your bicep to the junction where your neck meets the sternum and let your chest sit in between. So you want to get up there, aim it towards it, see how that's coming up, and my chest is sitting in between. You don't want to go above the chest because then that's all shoulder. You want to keep the chest nice and in front of the movement, and you will literally feel those fibers lighting up like you cannot believe. Next up, we've got the overhead press. Now the main target here is, you've guessed it, the front delt. The lateral delt will also be working. The muscles we want to try and eliminate as much as possible here is actually the upper trap, so the ones that hitch the shoulder upwards. Now this one is very similar to the bench press, except we don't need the lats to help stabilize. They're just there for the ride, but we can help them to cue the movement. The key here is as you press, you want your elbows forward for good technique. Now you don't have to, you can flare them out to the side if you don't get shoulder pain, but if we can get the elbows forward in the scapular plane, which is roughly 30 degrees because that's the angle of the joint, then it's easier to press up. The only reason it's easier is because the muscles of the shoulder blade are in optimal position to stabilize the shoulder. Now yes, you can press from behind your head. It's not dangerous as long as your wrists are above the elbows. The problem with behind the head pressing comes in when you don't have the mobility to get there and you start pressing like this, with your elbows forward and your hands behind the head. That is when you run into trouble. So if you can't achieve it, don't do it. It's that simple. So when it comes to cueing, I said you can use the lats, and the way in which we do it is try keep the lats as wide as possible. As you push up, try keep them wide. You don't want the shoulders to shrug up. You want them to be nice and wide, working upwards. The key with stabilizing this movement is understanding exactly what's happening at the shoulder, and this is why you can't keep the traps out. As you push your arms overhead, the shoulder blade rotates outwards. Now we want it to rotate outwards, that's optimal. What we don't want it to do is elevate, so lift up. What that means is, what we don't want happening is that as you press, so we don't want elevation, we want to try and, as I say, flare the lats, arch backwards, and press up, just letting the shoulder blade rotate outwards. This will keep the upper traps out the movement and put a lot of the emphasis on the anterior deltoid. This will also challenge the core, quite difficult as you're standing. The easiest way to get rid of that is take a seat. Now you've got two options here. You've got the options where your shoulder blades move the easiest, which is this one, and then you've got the option that you can lift the more weight, which is using the backrest and pushing into it. In my book, I'd recommend doing a bit of both. Right guys, in order to help you understand this, I want you to watch my shoulder blades. So the first one I'm going to do incorrectly, where I let them elevate and they come up, and actually it feels quite uncomfortable on the shoulders. The second one is, we need to understand how this down and outward rotation happens. There's not much happening on the outside of the shoulder blade over there, pulling it outwards. What happens is you've got your mid traps and your lower traps, which attach lower traps more to the spine of the scapula, mid traps more towards the outer end, and what happens is they sort of pull down and in and inwards. So what happens is you've got your upper traps which attach to the end of the spine, which pull it this way. You've got your lower traps which angle it down. And as you push up, keeping it down is the lower traps and turning it outwards is exactly the movement that we need. All right guys, time to put those pumpkins in the field, get those lateral delts growing for Halloween with the lateral raise. This one is the easiest of all to understand the movement, right? We want the lateral delts in, we want the traps out of it. It's that simple. Now there is another muscle that will help out no matter what, similar to pec minor. You've got supraspinatus, one of your rotator cuff muscles. You cannot get rid of it, but luckily it's weak enough that your deltoid, if the weight's heavy, will do pretty much all of the work, so we don't need to worry about it. Yes, we do have the stabilizers working, and for this one, they're more important than before. So basically, because you're out there, think about this. Think about a seesaw, but the center point is no longer in the middle, it's right over to one side. That is your shoulder. This is where all those muscles we spoke about earlier, the teres major, teres minor, rotator cuff, so supraspinatus, infraspinatus, rhomboids major, rhomboid minor, traps are all working to keep that seesaw going up, even though the mid portion is right on the end. Without them on this one, because we're in a long lever, we'd be buggered. So this one, the cue is the easiest of all of them. We literally just have to do one thing, and that's keep the shoulder blade still. So we want all those muscles working isometrically, holding on nice and tight, and then the only things moving the weight are gonna be your lateral deltoid with a little bit of help with the anterior deltoid, and then that supraspinatus. If you can manage to keep the shoulder blade still, it is extremely difficult to do, but the delts will be doing most of the work then. So after watching all of this, I'm sure there's a common theme amongst all of them, and that is shoulder blade, shoulder blade, shoulder blade, shoulder blade. Having strong shoulder blade support and that shoulder blade force couple is key to a great bench press and a great chest day and an even better shoulder day. So there are some exercises that we can use on our back day to strengthen these muscles. The first one is your lat pull down, which I hope most of you are doing. The one that everyone seems to leave out is your straight arm scapular pull down. This one is vital for stabilizing through the traps and rhomboids, exceptionally important. And the other is your face pull with external rotation. I know Jeff Cavalier, if you're listening to this, you'll appreciate it. Face pulls are ideal for working the rotator cuff, really helping stabilize that shoulder. And guys, shoulder blade proprioception, which means where your shoulder blade is in space, is something that is exceptionally difficult to learn. So don't think you can watch this video and then go and apply it straight away. If you're over the age of 25 and your neurosystem's fully developed, then potentially you might be able to. If you're under 25, you probably won't. And the key example of this is Sam Sulek. How long did it take him to realize how to position his shoulder blades for the bench press? It took him ages, but he finally got there. So practice makes perfect. Things to do during the day is actually just mess around with your shoulder blade and feel it in all different positions. Try and learn where your shoulder blade is in space. You can also go down and do a scapular press up. So if you go down to the floor, lock yourself in and let your shoulder blades come together and press you back up. Let them drift forward, pull them back down, and just play around with those shoulder blade positions as best you can to learn where that shoulder blade is in space. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, I've got some great news for you. This is going to be a series where we cover back day, we cover arms, and then we cover the dreaded legs. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time. If you liked the video, please smash that thumbs up button down below and consider hitting subscribe because it'll mean the world to me. Until then, we'll catch you in the next one.